In this module, we are going to really dig around into the structure, properties, and color of glass. This says Module 7. It's actually Module 8, so let's fix that first. So when we think about glass, we might think about several different things. We can think about stained glass. This is a church in downtown Nashville. It's First Baptist Nashville, and it's known for its really beautiful stained glass here. We can think about decorative glass, which are shown here and here. We can think about glass functional vessels. We can think about paperweights. And so just these are some examples of what we may think of when we think about glass. Now, we have not always, since the dawn of time, worked with glass. So we had to learn how to make it. So before we learned to make glass, we used naturally occurring glasses. And people mostly use those for things like tools or weapons. So there are three types of naturally occurring glasses. The first type are tektites. Okay. These are small, oval-shaped glass that come from meteors. Right. They generally run green or black. You can see examples of them here. These are different examples of the tektites. The next type that we run into is obsidian. Obsidian is just cooled lava. And it's glassy volcanic rock. We have an example of obsidian right here, so that's an arrowhead made out of obsidian. And then the third type is pumice, and that is a foamed sea glass. And that's formed when gases are released from lava. As it cools. Okay, it looks like that. So both of these originate from lava. These have kind of these pits in them. I'll have an example that you can see. These have pits in them. This is generally pretty smooth. The reason this has pits in it is because it has gases that have been embedded in here to make it look like that. Now, the first glass artifacts were knives and arrowheads of obsidian from Paleolithic times. So those are the first ones that we really had. So let's talk about the discovery of glass. Most historians agree that glass making began in Egypt, and there should be a comma here, so let's put that in. Mesopotamia or Phoenicia, prior to 3500 BC. So when we think about Phoenicia is here. There's Mesopotamia here. This is Egypt. Modern day Lebanon is kind of right around in here. And the first kind of site of the origin of glass was described by Pliny the Elder. And it was right here on the beach here. And I want to point that out because there are three theories really on how glass was discovered. And one of the theories is that it's thought to have been discovered accidentally while cooking in sandy alkaline environments of this beach. Now, people went and tried to recreate this, and it was sort of successful, but there has been a lot of criticism of that. So take that for what it's worth. So when we talk about the discovery of glass making, there are three theories of how it was discovered. The first theory is it happened accidentally while cooking in sandy, alkaline environments. right? The second is it could have been an offshoot of metalworking because silicate impurities are in metal ores. So it could have been discovered when people were working with metals. Because metals often have silicate impurities. And then the third hypothesis is it was a result of experimentation with ceramic glazes. Because and the reason people think about that, so when we think about ceramics, we think about pottery, and the glaze on top of the pottery is a glass glaze, and ceramics with glazes were developed right around the same time as glass vessels started to be developed as well. So here is an example of a Roman glass beaker from about the 4th century. So this is an early example. So this is a Roman glass beaker from about the 4th century BC. Okay. Only about 50 of these are left. Most of them probably got broken over time. But I like to show kind of a picture of like an early picture of glass. Now, the discovery of glass was pretty revolutionary. It's really unlike any other material during this time period. And the closest modern material analog are, are probably organic plastics that we use today. Um, Molten glass can be poured into almost any shape and retains that shape that it's poured into when it cools. And so it makes it a really, really versatile material where we can make lots and lots of things, very similar to plastics today. Now, we're going to look into some of the early methods of working with glass. And the first early method that we are going to look at is core forming, or glass that has been formed by using a core. So when we look at this, you start and there is a metal rod here with core forming, and then some sort of organic material is used as the core. So we have some sort of organic material. A lot of times it was dung, right? And then what happens is that organic material is baked in some way and the rod is turning. Then once that is hardened, that is rolled through glass. And then once it's rolled through glass, that's heated up to form a really nice glass piece right here. And there are kind of other things that you can do. You can see they're wrapping glass around it here while they're turning, and we're going to try to watch a video in class working with this type. This is a core formed vessel out of Egypt. Here are the dates. And so you can see you could get really nice decorative patterns with this core forming method. So as we kind of fast forward through history, there were some new and faster methods that were developed by the Romans and the Phoenicians. So the Romans and the Phoenicians developed several ways to work with glass, but the three that we're going to focus on is glass blowing, which is still used today. You can go to hobby shops and see glass being blown. You can even participate in some of that, which is very fun. This is an example of a glass blown vessel. They also started experimenting with multi-layered glass that was called millefore, right, which you can still get in Italy today. This is an example of a millefore bowl. That's millefore is an Italian for 1,000 flowers. This is on display at the Cleveland Art Museum. It's dated to be about 1 to 100 AD, or what's now referred to as CE, the Common Era. So that's an example of that, but it's kind of the floral look there on the glass. And then the third method that was experimented with was glass carving. Right. It's also sometimes called glass cutting. An example of this is here, right? And this is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So this was probably a piece of blown glass or shaped, and then the designs were cut or carved on it. Now, what you're going to see through history is as this glass making progressed, and then with the fall of Rome and the Middle Ages, it declined. Just the use of, just a lot of knowledge was lost during that time, and so there was a real revitalization of it in Venice during the Renaissance. And that's the 13th to 15th century. Right. And a big thing where there were a lot of secret techniques. So artisans wanted to be known for their materials, and so they would use secret techniques, and they were really trying to keep it in Venice, but that failed, and glassmaking then slowly made its way to other European countries. It ended up in the Americas in 1608. At Jamestown. And so most of the glass that was made during that time in Jamestown was exported back to England. Now, some of the different glass methods that they were using during that time, when we talk about glass blowing, there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can start with an empty mold, so the mold is closed, right? And then glass is dripped down, and then through a tube, there's air that's blown in here to expand the glass out. And then the mold is removed, and you can see here that there's some kind of on the top. And so a lot of times what will happen is glassmakers will trim that off to give a really nice finished piece. This is another kind of example of that, where you have this kind of ball of glass going in here. It's molten. The glass blower blows on it, and then you end up with a vase. But the vase has the same shape and design as what you have in this particular pot there. There is also another method, it's glass pressing, where you have glass that's put down, you have some sort of design, this is pressed, and you end up with the glass here pressed into the design. And this can be combined with another method called slumping, where that glass is placed over an object, and then the glass is heated in a kiln generally, and it takes the shape of whatever object that it was placed on top of. So these are all different types of modern production methods that are still used today. Now, other examples of glass that you may see today are things like stained glass, right? That began in the 10th to 12th century. It's colored glass, held together with lead strips. And when we talk about that, the colored glass, sometimes the colored glass is colored because of the elements that are in it, but it can also be painted. And so sometimes these were painted and fired. To fuse paint to the glass. Now, painting glass is still around. It began in the 2nd and 3rd century. Right, BCE. And basically, all that's used is glass is used as the painting surface. And so I looked for painted glass. I found these 2 pieces of rainbow glass on Etsy. This is something that is still really commonly done. Another type of glass painting, though, that was really popular in the Middle Ages was reverse painted glass. So reverse painted glass, you just apply paint to a piece of glass. And then view the image by turning it over. So this was popular in the Middle Ages. Right? And it was often used to paint clock faces during the mid-19th century. And this is an example of a reverse glass painting from around 1785 to 1789. So it can be very, very detailed, which I think is incredibly impressive. The last thing that we are going to talk about historically with glass are Prince Rupert drops. These were named after Prince Rupert of the Rhine, who brought them to England in 1660. Okay, these are made by dropping melted glass into cold water. And what happens is the outside of the glass cools really rapidly. To form a tough skin. Okay. It's particularly interesting because if the tail is broken, it shatters. So they are quite delicate, right? So when we look at an example of the Prince Rupert drop, there's an example here, but this is really what it looks like. So you drop the glass in, there is this part here, and then this is called the tail. Um, this part is particularly strong, so it can withstand the blow from a hammer or a bullet without breaking. But if the tail is broken, then the whole thing goes through and shatters. And we'll look at some videos of this in class. All right, so that finishes up our introduction to glass. In the next screencast, we'll start to talk about the molecular structure of glass.